Before Suge Knight was put behind bars, the former Death Row Records boss had built a reputation as one of the most feared men in hip-hop. His presence could be felt all across the 90s music scene. But Suge's story isn't just about hit songs and platinum albums. It's also filled with fights, grudges, and some of the biggest rivalries in rap. Long before his 28-year sentence, Suge made his feelings known about those he considered his enemies. Here's a look at the top artists who landed on the wrong side of the fallen music mogul. Starting at number 7, we have Eazy-E. Before Suge Knight could build his throne, he first had to shatter one belonging to Eric Eazy-E Wright.
Tried to destroy my record company with the help of others.
In the early 1990s, NWA had changed music forever, and at the center of their empire was Eazy-E, the group's founder and the head of their label, Ruthless Records. The label's sonic identity was crafted by the phenomenal production talent of Dr. Dre. However, as NWA's success exploded, so did the internal tensions. Dr. Dre grew increasingly frustrated, believing that he was being cheated out of his fair share of the profits by Eazy-E and the group's manager, Jerry Heller. Dre wanted out, but he was locked into what seemed like an unbreakable contract. This is where Suge Knight, a former bodyguard with formidable street connections and immense ambition, saw his opportunity. He envisioned a new label with Dr. Dre as its superstar producer, but he couldn't move forward until Dre was free from Ruthless. Since legal negotiations were failing, Knight decided on a more direct approach, one that would become his signature method. He arranged a meeting with Eazy-E at a recording studio. What happened next has become one of the most infamous stories in hip-hop history. Suge Knight, accompanied by a crew of imposing men, confronted Eazy-E. They didn't come to negotiate with lawyers, they came with an ultimatum. According to Jerry Heller and others present, Knight and his associates, armed with lead pipes and baseball bats, cornered Eazy-E.
Lock the door. All these cats come from under the bed and out the closet in the bathroom with guns.
The demand was simple. Sign the papers releasing Dr. Dre, the DOC, and singer Michel'le from their Ruthless contracts. It was made clear that this was not a request. Suge Knight even threatened to hurt Eazy's mother if he didn't let Dre go. Faced with what he perceived as a life-threatening situation, Eazy-E folded. He signed the documents, effectively handing over the keys to the West Coast's future. Eazy-E, while often portrayed as just a gangster rapper, was also a shrewd businessman. He later spoke about the incident, never fully denying the intimidation, but framing it with a sense of defiance. In a well-known 1993 interview, when asked about the confrontation, he downplayed being scared and highlighted a crucial detail he managed to secure. While he was forced to release Dr. Dre, he refused to sell his publishing rights. This meant that for every record Dr. Dre produced at Death Row, including the monumental album The Chronic, Eazy-E would get paid. "I got a piece of everything he does," Eazy explained. "So he's my little star. He's working for me." This business victory was a constant source of irritation for Suge Knight. The animosity didn't end there. After Eazy-E's tragic death in 1995 from complications of AIDS, the feud took on a darker, more sinister tone. Years later, Suge Knight himself would add the most disturbing chapter to the story. During a 2003 appearance on the Jimmy Kimmel Live show while under house arrest, Suge made a chilling joke. He explained how the new way to kill someone without getting caught wasn't with a gun, because it was too obvious. Instead, he said, they get a sample from somebody with AIDS, and they shoot you with it. That's a slow death. An Eazy-E death.
They get blood from somebody with AIDS, and then they shoot you with it.
Oh,
so that don't happen.
This shocking on-air comment, delivered with a casual smile, has fueled conspiracy theories that Suge had something to do with Eazy-E's death. But, believe it or not, the next artist Suge Knight grew to hate the most was the very man he rescued from Eazy-E's grip. Yeah, that's Dr. Dre. The same Dre who fought tooth and nail to have his record. So how does someone go from being Suge's golden goose to one of his most hated enemies? Well, as with most things in Suge Knight's world, it's complicated. After Dr. Dre got contractually free from NWA, he and Suge Knight officially launched Death Row Records in 1991, and the music world was about to be shaken to its core. For a brief, brilliant period, their partnership was the most potent combination in entertainment. Suge provided the funding, the ruthless business acumen, and the fearlessness to disrupt the industry, while Dre served as the creative soul of the entire operation. This alliance gave birth to The Chronic in 1992, an album that was more than just a hit, it was a cultural phenomenon. The album was a masterpiece, launching the careers of artists like Snoop Dogg and establishing Death Row as the new powerhouse. For a moment, it seemed like nothing could stop them. However, the very aggression that Suge Knight used to liberate Dr. Dre from Eazy-E began to poison their own venture from within. The atmosphere at the Death Row offices and studios started to change. It became less of a creative haven and more of a gangster's paradise, teeming with Suge's entourage and affiliates. Stories of brutal intimidation became common. Producers and engineers worked in a climate of fear, and artists who fell out of line faced violent consequences.
I mean, a lot of those guys that worked there was scared.
This was not the environment a meticulous, laser-focused musician like Dr. Dre could thrive in. He was an artist dedicated to perfecting his craft in the studio, but he found himself increasingly surrounded by the chaos and violence he had described in his music, now brought to life in his workplace. The breaking point for Dre was not one single event, but a steady accumulation of tyranny. He grew tired of looking over his shoulder, of the constant threat of violence, and of Suge Knight's iron-fisted control over every aspect of the business.
Dre was scared too. I mean, it was all those guys, you know, I look at their videos.
He felt that the negativity was not only dangerous, but was also stifling his creativity. The man who had built the Death Row sound no longer felt at home there. In 1996, at the absolute height of the label's power and influence, Dr. Dre made the shocking decision to walk away. This was a move that many considered professional suicide. He was leaving the most successful rap label in the world, abandoning his master recordings and forfeiting millions of dollars. But for Dre, it was a matter of survival and sanity. This departure was a massive blow to Death Row and marked the beginning of the end of its golden era. It also created a deep and lasting animosity between the two former partners. Dr. Dre went on to build his own new empire with Aftermath Entertainment, but his exit left a gaping hole at Death Row and placed the label's biggest remaining star, his own protege, in a very difficult position. When Dr. Dre walked away from Death Row, he left his greatest discovery, Snoop Doggy Dogg, behind. And Snoop soon entered Suge's hate list. As the label's other multi-platinum superstar, Snoop was the embodiment of the G-Funk era. His laid-back, melodic flow was the perfect complement to Dre's beats. For years, Snoop and Suge had a formidable partnership, ruling the charts with the phenomenal success of Snoop's debut album, Doggy Style. Snoop was the face of the label, and as long as the hits kept coming, the relationship was strong. But with Dre gone, Snoop lost more than just his producer. He lost his mentor and his buffer from Suge's more volatile impulses.
Yo, hey, Doggy Dog, cut that shit off.
Right. Right. Did you have anything else after that?
That was it.
The turning point that twisted their alliance into genuine animosity came after the tragic death of Tupac Shakur in 1996. The event deeply shook Snoop. He began to publicly distance himself from the violence and gang-centric mentality that his friend's murder represented. In interviews, he started calling for peace between the East and West Coasts, a move that was seen as heroic by many, but was viewed as the ultimate betrayal by Suge Knight. To Suge, conflict was a business strategy. He thrived on the us against them narrative, and Snoop's calls for peace were a direct challenge to the Death Row brand and Suge's authority. Suge's resentment quickly turned public. He began to openly mock Snoop in interviews, belittling him and questioning his gangster credibility. Suge saw Snoop's new perspective as a sign of weakness, and he made sure everyone knew it. Snoop, in turn, began to speak out about the toxic environment at the label.
And struck a deal because everybody else was scared of that nigga.
Right.
Everybody, that's when Suge Knight was the monster, the boogeyman.
The feud became cemented in their music. After finally breaking free from Death Row by signing with Master P's No Limit Records, a move that further enraged Suge, Snoop unleashed his frustrations. On his 2002 track Pimp Slapped, he directly attacked his former boss, rapping, "Suge Knight's a b***," and that's a fact. The hatred was now mutual and undeniable. While the beef almost reached nuclear levels, it came to a screeching halt when Knight was sent back to jail in 2003 for 10 months after reportedly punching a nightclub valet. After Snoop dissed Suge on Pimp Slapped, Knight started his own campaign against Snoop from behind bars. Members of the new Death Row, Eastwood, Spiderlock, and Gangsta Rid released the song The Row Y'all Hoes on the 2003 Dysfunctional Family soundtrack. The diss track included a barrage of insults aimed at Snoop and resulted in a lawsuit filed by Snoop's mom and others. While it's unclear exactly what happened after Knight's diss, Snoop Dogg said in 2013 that he was cool with Suge after a meeting of the minds transpired.
Our differences were never different. It was just a minor miscommunication, you know. A lot of times men...
The Dogfather chalked up the tense feud as miscommunication. Another artist Suge Knight disliked was Sean Diddy Combs. Sean Puff Daddy. Combs was one man Suge saw as his true rival for the soul of hip-hop. Puff's label, Bad Boy Records, was the East Coast's reigning empire, and it was everything Death Row was not. While Death Row championed a raw, unfiltered gangster reality, Bad Boy was known for its glossy, high-budget music videos, radio-friendly samples, and a flamboyant style featuring shiny suits and champagne. To Suge, this wasn't just a different business model, it was an insult to the grit and authenticity he believed he represented. He despised what he saw as a watered-down, commercialized version of the culture, and he directed that contempt squarely at its architect. This simmering hatred boiled over and became a public declaration of war at the 1995 Source Awards in New York City. The event was already tense, with the East and West Coast factions filling the theater. When Suge walked onto the stage to accept an award, he saw his chance to humiliate his rival on his own home turf. Leaning into the microphone, he didn't thank anyone. Instead, he delivered one of the most infamous lines in music history.
Any artists out there want to be an artist and want to stay a star, don't want to have to worry about the executive producer trying to be all in the video, all on the record, dancing. Come to Death Row.
There was no question who he was talking about. Puff Daddy was famous for ad-libbing, dancing, and starring in the videos of his artists. The insult was direct, personal, and profoundly disrespectful. The room erupted in a mix of cheers from the West Coast attendees and loud boos from the New York crowd. In that single moment, Suge Knight had drawn a definitive line in the sand. He had weaponized his personal disdain for Puff Daddy and turned an industry rivalry into an open, hostile feud. Suge Knight's war with Bad Boy Records was never just about the man in the shiny suit. To truly cripple an empire, you had to topple its king, and the undisputed king of New York was Christopher Wallace, the Notorious B.I.G. The Notorious B.I.G. was another artist Suge hated the most. For Suge and Death Row, Biggie wasn't just a competitor, he was the living, breathing symbol of the enemy. His lyrical dexterity, commercial success, and commanding presence made him the primary obstacle to Death Row's goal of total hip-hop domination. Suge's hatred for Puff Daddy's enterprise was therefore projected onto its most celebrated artist. The animosity became intensely personal and venomous when Suge brought Tupac Shakur into the Death Row fold. Tupac already harbored a deep-seated grudge against Biggie, whom he blamed for a 1994 robbery and shooting at Quad Studios in New York. Suge Knight didn't just tolerate this existing beef, he weaponized it. He saw Tupac's personal vendetta as the perfect fuel for his corporate war. Suge saw his opportunity and made Tupac an offer he couldn't refuse. He flew to the prison, met with Tupac, and agreed to post his $1.4 million bail. In return, Tupac would sign a 3-album contract with Death Row. When Tupac was released, he was immediately unleashed as Suge's ultimate weapon. Suge encouraged and financed the most vicious diss track in music history, Hit 'Em Up, where Tupac not only threatened Biggie's life but also made humiliating personal claims about his wife, Faith Evans. Suge put the full might of the Death Row machine behind this attack, ensuring the insults were heard loud and clear across the country. This campaign of hatred reached its tragic peak following the murder of Tupac Shakur on the night of September 7, 1996, in Las Vegas. After Tupac was killed while riding in the passenger seat of Suge's car, the Death Row camp, either through genuine belief or calculated strategy, immediately pointed the finger eastward. Suge did absolutely nothing to quell the raging rumors that the notorious B.I.G. and his bad boy affiliates were behind the assassination. He allowed this narrative to fester, cementing Biggie's status as public enemy number one in the eyes of the West Coast. In Suge's world, this wasn't just a rival anymore. It was the man allegedly responsible for the death of his star artist. The hatred was no longer just about music or business. It had become a matter of blood. To properly wage this all-consuming war, Suge had needed a general, a soldier on the front lines who hated Bad Boy as much as he did. That soldier was Tupac. Suge Knight's reign of hostility was not limited to the coasts. His us against the world mentality meant that any artist or label enjoying success could be deemed an enemy, and the popular Cleveland group Bone Thugs and Harmony was a prime target. And that is why this hip-hop group is number 2 on our Suge Knight hate list. The source of Suge's animosity towards them was twofold. Firstly, and most importantly, they were signed to Ruthless Records, the label started by his original foe, Eazy-E. Even after Eazy's death, that association alone was enough to place them in an opposing camp. Secondly, their rapid, melodic style of rapping was unique and immensely popular, posing a direct commercial threat to Death Row's dominance. The feud was fought, as most of Suge's battles were, through his star soldier, Tupac Shakur. Tupac accused the group of stealing his thug lifestyle mantra and signature style. Suge Knight eagerly stoked these flames. Seeing an opportunity to discredit a rising competitor, he encouraged and amplified the conflict. This was not merely an artist's personal squabble, it became an official Death Row sanctioned beef. When Tupac recorded his legendary diss track Hit 'Em Up, a song financed and promoted by Suge, he made sure to include a direct threat to the Cleveland group. After viciously attacking Biggie and Puff Daddy, Tupac rapped, "And tell your little homies in Bone Thugs and Harmony, pack a great, now you know." By including them in the same breath as his main rivals, Suge and Tupac officially branded Bone Thugs as enemies of Death Row. The group later responded with their own subliminal disses on their multi-platinum album The Art of War, showing that the animosity was mutual. At the 1995 Source Awards, this simmering tension came to a head. Bone Thugs released the First of the Month video in which members donned beanies, some with imagery that appeared aflame due to special effects intended to make their afros look like fire. But the effect twisted the beanies patch to look on fire instead, and Death Row interpreted it as a deliberate burn on their signature style. According to Crazy Bone, Suge felt deeply disrespected and allegedly offered $10,000 to have goons attack them on stage during their performance.
Suge Knight was gonna pay somebody $10K to go on stage and attack y'all while y'all was performing?
Yeah, that's what somebody told me.
Despite the threat, no physical altercation materialized. The group's narratives recall lots of confrontations, lyrical traffic standoffs, but nothing ever went beyond that. The hatred directed at Bone Thugs and Harmony was a clear example of Suge's ruthless business philosophy. In his empire, there was no room for other kings. This legacy of creating enemies would extend far beyond the 90s, even ensnaring a new generation of artists who became linked to his old feuds. At the very top of Suge Knight's list of most hated artists sits 50 Cent. The hatred Suge Knight felt toward 50 Cent did not come from a personal fight between them. It was part of an old grudge, a leftover wound from a battle Suge had already lost years earlier. By the early 2000s, Death Row Records was only a shell of what it once was, but Suge's reputation for being intimidating was still strong. It was around that time that Curtis 50 Cent Jackson began to dominate hip-hop. For Suge, the problem was simple. 50 Cent was the new star that Dr. Dre had taken under his wing. Dre's departure from Death Row had been the beginning of the label's downfall, and Suge never forgave him for it. Now seeing Dre build up another powerful artist felt like a personal insult. To Suge, 50 was a living reminder of everything he had lost. Every time 50 Cent's face appeared on TV or his music played on the radio, it reminded Suge of the success that had slipped away. Through Aftermath Entertainment, Dr. Dre turned 50 into one of the biggest names in the world. His debut album, Get Rich or Die Tryin', took over the charts, powered by the same kind of raw street presence Suge once controlled with Tupac Shakur. Watching his former partner create another unstoppable force without him only deepened Suge's resentment. He hated 50 not just for who he was, but for what he represented. proof that Dre was thriving without Death Row. The tension came to a head during the filming of 50 Cent's Into Club music video in 2003. According to Bazaar, the set was buzzing with energy when Suge Knight suddenly appeared. He didn't come alone. He arrived with a large entourage, the kind of presence that usually made people nervous. For a moment, it felt like a standoff straight out of a gangster movie. Suge stood there, silent, sizing up the scene. He took a slow puff from his cigar, exhaled the smoke into the air, gave a simple gesture to his men, and then turned and walked away without saying a word. What stood out that day wasn't what Suge did, it was how 50 reacted. He didn't flinch. He didn't back down. He stood his ground, calm and unfazed, as if Suge's presence meant nothing to him. For a man like Suge, who thrived on fear, that was a blow to his ego. Also, things again reached a breaking point at the 2004 Vibe Awards. Dr. Dre was there to receive a Lifetime Achievement Award when a man named Jimmy James Johnson, said to be connected to Suge, walked up to Dre's table. Words were exchanged and Johnson suddenly punched Dre in the face. Chaos broke out across the floor. In the middle of the fight, Young Buck, a member of 50's G-Unit crew, stabbed Johnson. The brawl was a very public confirmation that this feud was more than just talk. After that, the rivalry became even more personal. Most people in the music business kept their distance from Suge, but 50 was different. Having already survived being shot 9 times, he had no fear of Suge's reputation. In one well-known incident, 50 learned that Suge was staying at a hotel in Las Vegas. He immediately flew his crew out, booked a room directly above Suge's, and then went down to the lobby to make sure Suge knew he was there. It was a calculated show of strength, sending the message that he would never be intimidated. Suge didn't hate 50 because of what he said or did directly. He was threatened by 50's unstoppable rise and unbothered attitude. And when Suge tried to scare him, 50 just stood his ground. And that rattled Suge even more.